Hello! Telvanni here, and I wanted to give you guys a little bit of an update on the theoretical League starter for mana stacking Lightning Conduit Elementalist. A lot of you have seemed very interested in the build, so I've decided to go back and take a look at it, and see where we could make some improvements. One of the first things we have changed is that instead of going for pure energy shield bases, you're probably going to want to look at picking up some evasion bases or maybe energy shield evasion hybrid bases. Ultimately, I decided that, 500 more total energy shield probably isn't going to make mapping feel better than something like 20 to 30% more evade chance. The only drawback to using pure evasion bases is that you'll most likely need to either use essences or the crafting bench to get some mana rolls on those, as mana can only roll naturally occurring on energy shield bases and jewelry. This is another reason why I might recommend picking up a hybrid energy shield evasion base early on instead of a true evasion base, as it could make gearing a little bit easier. But at the end of the day, I think you'll probably want evasion bases with high evasion rating for your endgame build. Alternatively, you could go the other direction, and instead of jade flasks and evasion pieces, try to go for something like a granite flask and armor bases, or armor energy hybrid bases. This will increase your physical maximum hit pool, but generally speaking, I feel like evasion is stronger for mapping in most cases. Yes, you can get one shot occasionally with an evasion build, but just dodging attacks entirely is going to feel better most of the time, and as things stand, we're already kind of a meat shield. One of the next things that we've changed is that we are no longer using a rare wand and have instead picked up Singularity. This is very strong for our build, giving us all the things we love like lightning damage, cast speed, and quite notably, reduced mana cost of skills. The Scepter also gives us 100% increased damage against hindered enemies, and luckily enough, it also causes all nearby enemies to be hindered as well, so it's very good for us offensively and defensively. The next thing that we've changed here is swapping out the Barracks Grip 2-stone ring for a Valko's Sign. Valko's Sign is simply stronger for our Lightning Conduit build. As you can see, it gives us about 10% more damage than a Barracks. Yes, Barracks Grip gives flat lightning damage, but with Archmage, we're already getting so much flat added lightning damage that this really isn't that great anymore. Valko's Sign, on the other hand, gives us maximum mana, which we love to see, and increased lightning damage and increased damage against shocked enemies. So overall, this is a very powerful and cheap unique that is going to be hard to replace. Keen-eyed observers will notice that we are losing the Energy Shield Leech from Barracks Grip by swapping to Valko's Sign. However, this is fine. If we come over to the tree here, you can see that we are using some of the new Palsteron Tech, pathing over here to grab Light Eater and Instant Leech. This is going to be insanely powerful for keeping our life, energy shield, and mana topped up while mapping, as every enemy that we hit will be giving us instant life and energy shield. Also, because we are a Lightning Conduit build, pathing over here isn't even that big of a loss for us, as we are able to pick up static blows, giving us some much-loved shock effect. So for something like a mana-stacking Hierophant, Light Eater is like 8 or 9 passive points out of the way, but for us, it's only 5. While we're on the subject of Palsteron Tech, if you find yourself having issues with getting stun-locked, you can respec a few points and path all the way down here to Unwavering Stance. The drawback with this, however, is that you're going to lose all of the benefits from evasion. So make sure if you swap over to this, you're going for a Granite Flask and armor bases on your gear rather than evasion. I kind of think that we'll be okay with just some evasion, the Energy Shield Mastery over here, some stun avoidance over here, and Soul of the Brine King. But like I said, if it becomes an issue, the tech is there to solve it. Moving on, I've unallocated these passive points over here. I'd still recommend using the Dreamer if you're having difficulty sustaining your mana costs, but right now we are relying pretty heavily on a Mana Flask instead for a lot of our cost reduction. You can see that if I deactivate our Mana Flask, our cost per second shoots up from a very manageable 500 mana per second to a whopping 1300. Honestly, I think this is going to be fine. Mana Flasks have a very low charge cost, so you can usually get something like 30 to 40 seconds without gaining any charges and still not run out of Mana Flasks. However, if you're not a big fan of the playstyle and hate being reliant on flasks, you can always grab that Dreamer node instead. Just be careful here, do not take both of these at the same time, as that could potentially reduce your mana cost all the way down to 0, which would nullify the benefits we are receiving from Arcane Capacitor and Arcane Surge. While we are on the subject of mana sustain, it should be noted that Mastermind of Discord is a very powerful Ascendancy node for Elementalist. It gives 1% of mana per second, if you've inflicted exposure recently, and this is modified by increases and reductions to mana recovery. Early on in the league, it'll be very important that you keep your Arcanist brand up so that you can be receiving this benefit. However, once you start getting into maps and you've got just a little bit of a currency, you'll want to look at getting an Eldritch Glove implicit, granting exposure on hit, and then you won't need to worry about this. As a side note, you'll also want to grab a Conductivity or Elemental Weakness ring early on as well, and then you'll be able to drop Arcanist brand entirely. Finally, the last big change I made from the original video is that we are no longer taking the Shaper of Winter Elementalist passive, and are now instead taking Bastion of Elements. We were mostly just taking Shaper of Winter for the guaranteed chill, so that we could run something like Hypothermia, and we weren't really stacking chill effect. Plus, cold damage is never going to be our highest damage type, so at the end of the day we weren't really getting a huge amount of value from it. Bastion of Elements, on the other hand, is going to give us some really incredible defenses, reducing the overall amount of damage that we'll be taking from elemental hits in the long run. You can see here that if I deactivate this, we are losing about 10k effective hit pool, and our maximum elemental hit goes way down. Wrapping up, as you can see, we've made a handful of changes to the build. On paper, it looks like it'll have even more damage than the last iteration, while at the same time we've shored up some of our defenses. Again, I'd like to stress that this build is completely theoretical at this point. The numbers look good on paper, but we might get in-game and find that the build does not perform as well as we were hoping. Additionally, you'll probably need to level with traditional aura setups, and as a non-Archmage build, before you can transition towards the Archmage version of the build, once you have a little bit more gear. The last thing I'll mention here is that Lightning Conduit, by itself, is a very strong league starter. Non-mana stacking versions of Lightning Conduit have been tried and tested by content creators like Zizarin and myself, so if it looks like this Archmage version of the build ends up being a flop, you should have a pretty easy time transitioning over to a more traditional setup. Anyway, thank you for watching, good luck with your league, and I'll see you in the next one.